All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in person and on the live stream. I'm Anna Palmer, CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News, joined as always for this series with Jake Sherman, another founder of Punchbowl News. We are thrilled to be here this morning. We have a great conversation planned with Representative Cathy McMorris Rodgers, the Republican from Washington State, and of course, a key figure going into the next Congress, potentially the next chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee. This is part of our series with Apollo Management that's called Investing in Today, Tomorrow. So after the conversation with the Congresswoman, we are going to bring on Olivia let me make sure I say this, Wassenaar, Head of Sustainable Investing at Apollo, for a fireside chat about investing in a more sustainable future, how Apollo is looking at that. So we're really excited about that. As always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media platforms at Punchbowl News. So please share about this conversation this morning. And with that, we'll welcome the Congresswoman to the stage.
Good morning, and you'll notice she's wearing Punchbowl pink, which is
very appropriate. We appreciate that.
Which is a not a coincidence, I hope, Congresswoman.
All right, let's get to it, Jake.
So government, it seems like this is Groundhog Day, but government funding expires in 15 days. The fight right now is in the Senate. We're going to start with some news of the day, then we're going to get really into the meat here. Senate Democrats are trying to squeeze. This is somewhat in your purview. Permitting reform, so reform to permitting laws for oil and gas, clean energy into that government funding bill. Is there any scenario you would support what the Democrats are talking about?
It's hard for me to imagine a CR permitting deal written by Senator Schumer and Senator Manchin being something that I or any of the House Republicans would support. We certainly need permitting reform. It's one of the biggest barriers to energy, unleashing American energy, and so I am hopeful that we will be able to address permitting reform, but so far there's been no bipartisan conversations. Nobody has reached out to me, and as you just said, we're 15 days away from needing to strike this deal on the CR, so it's hard for me to see a CR permitting deal be a part of the final product.
And also, this is totally in your purview, but and we'll talk about COVID and other health-related issues in a couple minutes. There's also discussion about a COVID aid, COVID relief, and monkeypox aid. The administration is seeking tens of billions of dollars for those two priorities. Does the federal government need a bunch more money to deal with COVID and now to deal with monkeypox?
No. The federal government has received billions, tens of billions of dollars on COVID and other related items, and they have not been transparent with us about how they've used the current funds. There's pots of money that they could redirect, and I do not believe that they need more money. For energy and commerce, the big issues on the CR are the FDA user fees, and we are actively working to get FDA user fees some kind, the House, again, we did our work. We have a very strong user fee bill that passed the House, overwhelming bipartisan support. It's a strong bill that I hope that the Senate will look at that and attach that to the CR so that the FDA, there's certainty there. We also have some mental health reforms that we're hammering out, I was trying to think. And Spectrum. Spectrum is the other. The Spectrum Auction Authority expires on October 1st, and I believe, again, the House did our work. We passed an 18-month extension. It would be unfortunate, and I don't believe anyone wants to see that Spectrum Auction Authority expire.
Anna, just as a side note here, it highlights, this is our podcast voice going on, it highlights that the administration in the next Congress is going to have a tough time on COVID aid. I mean, that's an important thing to note. If Republicans win the majority.
Tough time this Congress with the majority, definitely a tough time going into next year. I want to talk about that.
Would it be a tough time if they would be transparent with us and accountable with the funds that we've appropriated? It's appropriate that we ask those
Fair
questions.
enough.
All right, let's talk about your role as ranking on Energy and Commerce, which has the purview over healthcare. If you are in the majority, what would you do about abortion laws? This is something that Democrats are hammering Republicans on right now on the campaign trail. Do you support Senator Lindsey Graham's bill to institute a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks?
I've long supported the pain-capable bill. 15 weeks is when babies can feel pain. Their fingers and toes have fully developed. It's about 4 months into the pregnancy. The majority of Americans have supported restrictions on abortion after 4 months. But I also know that the Americans do not support what the Democrats have passed twice out of the House, which is very extreme. It puts America in a line with North Korea and China. Abortion up until birth, 9 months, for any reason, race, sex, disability, including Down syndrome, taxpayer funded. That's the extreme position. The Republicans are going to continue to advocate for life, advocate for the dignity of life, and Republicans have supported the pain-capable bill.
Now, let's talk about the midterms for a second. We are 54, 53 days before the midterm elections. History would tell us, and who knows what history means in this context, but over the last 30 years, the party out of power from the White House takes the majority all but 2 times. Where do you put on your pundit hat? We'll throw you ours, but put on your pundit hat and tell us what you think is going to happen in the midterm elections.
Well, we're not planning any celebrations like the Democrats did this week, earlier this week on the inflation bill, premature celebrations. We're going to fight to the finish. We're going to continue to talk to Americans about issues that I believe are at forefront of their minds. It's cost of living, it's rising energy cost, and going to the food prices, and the rising fentanyl crisis, and violence across the country, challenges of getting baby formula. I was just home for several weeks. Those are the issues that are on people's minds, and we have solutions. But what we're seeing right now with the Democrats, with President Biden and the Democrats and one-party rule, is that their policies are making it harder on people. The number one answer I get when I ask people how they're doing, they'll say, "I'm tired. I'm tired. People are struggling." And my hope is to restore the promise of America and unleash American ingenuity and creativity and bring some hope to this country.
So Republicans take the majority in the House.
Yes. History which would show that but we have great candidates running all across the country. Yeah, so the question was, what is my number? We're going to push to the finish. It definitely has tightened in the last couple of months, but I believe as we continue to talk to people about issues that are on their hearts, their minds, and talk about solutions, I'm hopeful that we will have a strong Republican majority. These races are close, and we're going to push to the finish, and I'm overall very encouraged, the people that are stepping up to run on the Republican ticket and help restore hope and prosperity in our country.
All right, I want to shift to the topic of the day with a look at your priorities for 2023, sitting potentially as chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee if Republicans take control of the House, as most expect. From a 30,000-foot level, what are your top 3 priorities as chair next year?
The Energy and Commerce Committee is just it's a great committee.
As John Dingell said, if
oh my goodness,
if it moves, it's energy. If it doesn't,
right.
It's commerce.
Yeah. So basically, we control the world. Yeah.
That's what you think.
Yes. Great committee, great members. Very big picture. It's to protect Americans and to unleash innovation and technology in the United States of America, and that's going to be our big picture goal. Part of that is unleashing American energy. We are resource rich, and we have permitting and a regulatory structure right now that is crippling the energy sector. I want America to lead in clean energy solutions, and which we have been doing, but we need to unleash American energy. We need to hold big tech accountable. That's going to be a major priority. I'm a mom with 3 school-age kids. One of the biggest battles in my house is over screens and screen time. And
Me too.
Very concerned about big tech, and that's going to be a priority. And then I think the third area is probably around healthcare and the pandemic, COVID, the response to COVID, the oversight that we want to have around decisions that were made, as well as how we prepare for the next pandemic or future pandemics. Not that, we want to, there's going to be a lot of oversight and investigations in the Energy and Commerce Committee.
Let's talk about energy for a second, which is things that move. If we've seen what the Energy and Commerce Committee has done over the last, or I have at least, over the last 15 or so years on energy, what are your plans? I mean, inflation is obviously high, and energy has become one of the most expensive and biggest issues for Americans. Give me some things that you plan to do on the energy front when it comes to producing energy and keeping energy costs or driving energy costs down.
Well, we're going to stop the war that's been waged on American energy. We have abundant energy resources and ingenuity, new technologies that are so important to affordability, reliability, as well as our security, our energy security, and our national security. I'm quite disheartened by the political agenda that seems to be dominated on energy, and so we're going, that is making us more dependent upon Chinese supply chains and our foreign adversaries for energy. So we're going to unleash American energy. You've seen us. We introduced the American Energy Independence from Russia Act, which would ensure, it would say that it would ensure that we could export LNG right now, which would be. It's important to the United States, but it's also important to our allies at a time that Germany and the European Union needs natural gas, and Putin has canceled now Nord Stream 2, and we're headed into winter. We would address critical minerals that are so important to the clean energy sector in particular, but we need to be mining and manufacturing processing in the United States. Working with Bruce Westerman as the ranking Republican on resources on that. Nuclear energy. We have exciting advanced nuclear technology being developed in the United States. But we've been dependent upon uranium from Russia, enriched uranium from Russia. So now we need probably a uranium reserve so that we can lead on advanced nuclear technology, exciting technology that will help us meet our energy needs, but also we should be exporting that to others around the world. We want to unleash American energy, energy technology, and continue to lead in bringing down carbon emissions while we do it.
I want to ask just one more quick question, then there's a lot of things that we want to get to today, but on the energy front, when you think about renewables and the energy transition that there's so much focus on right now, the push to be net zero by 2050 by a lot of companies, if not sooner, how do you view that transition, and what role do you think that government has to either aid that, or is it government's role?
Well, I know we hear a lot about energy transition. Republicans think of it more as an energy expansion, and that we have been leading. The United States of America has been leading in clean energy technologies. We're proud of that. We've led in bringing down carbon emissions, and instead of crippling regulations that are making it more and more difficult on energy exploration, development, we need to be unleashing American energy. I'm very concerned that the current agenda is one that makes us dependent upon Chinese supply chains. We're not producing, we are dependent upon China for solar panels and wind machines, and many of the components of the batteries that are being developed today it's China and the critical minerals. So we need to be able to mine in America, manufacture in America, and energy security, energy dominance is dependent upon us making sure that America is leading, and in this transition, not to make us dependent upon China. That is dangerous. That's just so. Middle Eastern oil has, we spent 40 years becoming energy independent because we were concerned about being too dependent upon Middle Eastern oil. We're going to trade that for being dependent upon China supply chains for wind and solar and batteries? That doesn't make any sense to me. We need to unleash American energy.
Let's talk about tech. You and I spoke at the House Republican retreat in Jacksonville, Florida, or Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, I guess it was. We talked a little bit about your agenda when it comes to tech. I want to ask you kind of a two-barreled question here. Number one, what are your top-line issues, concerns? And number two, who do you think are the worst actors in tech right now?
Okay. Certainly holding big tech accountable is...
what does that mean, though? Tell us what that means.
So big top line, we have the task force that has been really doing work. It is narrowing Section 230 protections, especially for the larger companies, the bad actors, so that they be held accountable for the and giving more tools to the person that feels that they're being censored online. It means protecting kids. We have legislation in the privacy bill that would protect kids under the age of 17, their personal information. It is making sure that small companies and innovators can still have access to the internet, that there's a free internet available to them, and that they can compete. But it is the worst actors. I would put TikTok near the top of the list. I'm concerned about the impact on kids. We're seeing more cases of young girls in particular that are developing tics, and that's of concern. But also the amount of data that's being collected that has been stored in China, and making sure that individuals are empowered. That we give individuals the tools to protect their personal information, the private. Information of individuals needs to be protected, and we need to know when our data is being stored in China or used in China. I would put Snapchat up there too. The number of examples of individuals that have purchased a pill laced with fentanyl unknowingly off of Snapchat and died. I have stories in my own district, and they're not being held accountable for the criminal activity. Those would be a couple that would be on my list.
We are quickly running out of time. I feel like we could have a whole
1,000 more questions. Yeah,
but I do want to talk
Part
about,
2 coming up.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have you back on stage. But I want to talk about healthcare because that's another obviously big area of focus going into next year and your priorities there. The CDC right now is undergoing an internal review, and I think a lot of people might be shocked to know that the CDC has never had a congressional authorization.
Right.
What will you do when it comes to the CDC?
Clearly, it's time to authorize the CDC. We're the authorizing committee. We're the committee of jurisdiction. That's fundamental to our role as elected representatives of the people, is that we determine the mission and put the mission and give direction to these agencies. So CDC has never been authorized. NIH's authorization expired in 2020. Many of the agencies within the Energy and Commerce Committee need to have their authorization updated, but that is our fundamental responsibility. And I've seen Dr. Walensky, CDC director's review. She's asking for more money and more authority. Well, Congress is the one that needs to authorize that, and I believe this is just so fundamental to our oversight efforts as well as building trust, because the trust among the public health agencies has been shattered, especially during COVID in the last couple of years. And we need to be restoring trust, but restoring trust also means bringing in accountability. So I believe it's important that we are drafting the authorization to give that clear direction. FTC's authorization hasn't been reauthorized since 1998. This is pretty fundamental. There was just a Supreme Court decision. It's West Virginia versus the EPA. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that EPA has overstepped its authority in regulating the power sector. This goes to fundamentally our role as the elected representatives of the people. It's Article 1 of the Constitution. I take it very seriously, and I think it's important in restoring trust and confidence in representative government that we're doing this work. It's fundamental. It's the hard work necessary to legislate, but that's what we are here to do. And I look forward to bringing in these public health agency directors. I look forward to bringing in Dr. Fauci in front of the...
Dr. Fauci will be retired. You're still going to bring him...
We'll be bringing in Dr. Fauci, yes, in front of the Energy and Commerce Committee and doing the work of oversight, accountability, but to inform a legislative agenda, the policy that will be that would set the direction and the vision, the mission for these agencies.
All right, last question, Jake. We'll do this as a quick one.
Yeah, I'm curious on COVID. I think Republicans have questions on COVID response during the Trump administration, during the Biden administration. What are the kind of the top two things you want to know or you're interested in investigating when it comes to the government's response of COVID?
We need to answer the question of where COVID-19 originated. That's pretty fundamental to informing our decisions moving forward. That's one. And then I think overall the COVID response, the lockdowns, the decisions that were made in response to COVID that have, and whether, we want to look at the decisions that were made, what drove those decisions, and then how we might want to approach that in the future, because the lockdowns and the approach that was taken, you think about our kids, and this generation of kids, school-age kids that have been impacted, their education has been impacted, we have a mental health crisis among our kids due to the lockdowns, the decisions that were made in that moment that did not take into any consideration other factors, and really a top-down. I've talked to Dr. Walensky about this at CDC. She has school-age kids. And she told me, well, this isn't a mandate. Well, in Kettle Falls, Washington, and Spokane, Washington, it was received as a mandate. They did not have the ability to make those local decisions, what they thought would be the best decisions for their schools, for their kids. And so we need to ask those questions, and we need to make sure that we're making decisions that are actually going to protect people and help them also.
All right, Congressman, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right. All right, thank you, Jake. Great.
All right, now, thank you so much. We are going to welcome Olivia Wassenaar, the head of sustainability investing at Apollo, to come join us on stage. Olivia.
Thank you, Olivia.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. So first things first, you are head of Apollo's sustainable investing. Talk a little bit about, for those who are kind of this Washington audience, how does Apollo view sustainable investing? What is its approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, Apollo views this as one of the critical pillars of our growth and opportunity going forward. It is something that we've been doing for some time. We've invested about $19 billion over the last 5 years into climate and climate-related activities. So it's something that is not new, but it's also something that we see as having tremendous tailwinds going forward, an area where we want to focus capital, where we want to be a partner to industry, a partner to small businesses. We really want to help progress this transition and really help finance it.
Now, Anna mentioned this to the Congresswoman, but a lot of companies, and we've had a lot of conversation with lawmakers and companies about the push to become net zero by 2050 or earlier. Could you talk about that transition and what precisely you're seeing in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is amazing to me how many companies have actually made this commitment, and we love it. And frankly, one of the things we love doing is every time we see one of these new commitments coming out, trying to think how we as Apollo can help finance that. We've got so many different pools of capital across the platform, whether it's our yield business, our hybrid business, our retirement business, our equity business, trying to be a partner in that transition. But it's massive, right? Depending on the statistics you look at, it's roughly $5 trillion a year for the next 30 years that's really needed for this. And we think that's something that we can play a real part in.
Talk a little bit about, right now, inflation, energy prices, top of mind across the country for Americans. Certainly something that we hear lawmakers talking a lot about on both sides of the aisle, trying to figure out what can be done, if anything, to bring that down. How does this type of work impact kind of the price of energy going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So, during COVID, we saw, a real underinvestment in energy, and I think we're seeing, some of the impacts of that today. I do think the transition can really help move things forward. We are thrilled to see, upticks in building of wind and solar and battery and hydrogen, carbon capture, things like that in this country. And it is a really phenomenal movement. I mean, I do feel like we're heading into sort of the golden years of investing in this sector where everyone knows it's necessary. They know it's a transition, that it's something that, isn't going to happen overnight, but something that is very much going to be part of where we are going as a country and as a global community going forward.
You heard the Congresswoman talk about government's role in all of this. What do you think, what if anything, could the government do to help to move this initiative forward? And how does that compare to the private sector's role? I mean, there's a wide range on Capitol Hill of opinions on this, so I'm kind of curious of what your thought is.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things. I think, clarity is always helpful, right? And,
That's tough with government sometimes.
For small developers, obviously, knowing what the investment landscape is going to look like for a prolonged period is always helpful. And I think we have that, right? We have that now for new technologies. We have that now for existing technologies. I do think you're going to enter a period where people feel really confident investing because they know what the landscape is going to look like. Debottlenecking is going to be a part of it. Congressman Rodgers talked a little about what it takes for things like interconnects, for example. These are all things that are so critical to really building this out, and so really removing some of those bottlenecks so that we can really continue to push things forward. But I do think that clarity, that consistency, we are very much in a better state now than we were 6 months ago there, and that is truly huge for all folks investing in this sector.
It was interesting, obviously, talking to the Congresswoman about energy and commerce. It spans everything, all different industries, all different sectors. And when it comes to how you all think about investing, it's not really just the energy sector right now when you think about sustainability. Can you talk about that perspective, how it's more interconnected maybe than it has been in the past?
Absolutely. One of the things that I love about sustainability and climate is it's not a sector, it's a theme. It permeates so much of what we all do. Right, so many businesses are looking at this and trying to figure out what does it mean to us, what opportunities arise, what do we have to consider, what are the risks in and around this. If you look at the companies that have committed to net zero, it's a massive range. So for us, we think that gives a tremendous amount of opportunity to really come at it from so many different angles, and it for us, it does provide a lot of opportunities for private capital here to really help finance a real range of different sectors.
Now, we always ask people to look into their crystal ball into the future. People are always hesitant to do that, but project out 5 or 10 years. Where do you see the movement of sustainable investing going? Mm-hmm. And what are things that people in Washington should be thinking about now to help facilitate a climate for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in the next few years, you're going to see a lot of focus around really building out wind and solar, hydrogen, carbon capture. This is going to be a real focus for the next few years in this country, and getting those projects up and running and getting them of size and scale. I also think you're going to see a focus on supply chain, wanting to really shore up the supply chain so folks know that a project's going to get done on time because they've got all the components that they need for that, and a real focus on on bringing some of those components into accessibility in the U.S. Longer term, I think we're going to see a real rethinking on how we look at things from an infrastructure perspective, from a building perspective. So many of these things are really in the early innings of development, how we think about energy efficient buildings, how we think about redoing our infrastructure to think about different ways we might charge over time. So whether it's EV vehicles, whether it's hydrogen vehicles, there's really so much to do in that area.
All right. Unfortunately, Olivia, we are all out of time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I want to thank the Congresswoman as well for a very interesting and robust conversation about how she sees the future of her role on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Of course, a big thank you to Apollo Management for partnering with us on this series. This is our second in a three-part series, so we'll be back with one more conversation with them. And just a reminder, next Tuesday we will be back at the Roost with Senator John Thune talking about all kinds of things, so hope you can join us for that as well. Thanks a lot and have a great day.